To preface this video essay, I am not a professional in the field of psychology, and this video is not an analysis of any sort, backed up by research data. That is not my strong suit, and there are people who do that sort of thing exponentially better than I ever could. My goal is to talk about my personal experiences with the subject in the title, and hopefully create a conversation, as I know my experiences only account for my own, and there are people who feel wildly different about this. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Video games have been a large staple of my life, an ever-present thing that I could always rely on to keep me company, to help me bond with others, or to just help me unwind from the stress that builds up during everyday life. As I've spent so much time indulging in the medium, I've built somewhat of a deep and personal connection to a lot of games, for a lot of different reasons. More often than not, these connections stem from the feelings I had while playing a certain game, the vague and explicit memories and emotions that resurface whenever a particular title is mentioned. As an example, the faint orange glow of an indigo GameCube underneath an image of a sunny vista in my grandmother's house is what comes to mind when I think of Super Mario Sunshine. The memories I had as a kid watching my brother playing this game and playing it for myself was a magical experience for me growing up in the 2000s. It was my earliest exposure to what games were capable of, and it would remain in my memories for well over a decade as a gaming experience that could never be matched. Flash forward to my junior or senior year in high school, when I was able to play Super Mario Sunshine again for the first time in such a long time. It was the same game as I remembered playing as a kid. Everything felt just as it had back then, from the beautiful island of Al Delfino to the controls of Mario and Flood. But while the game felt extremely familiar, it also felt different. The same magic I felt playing this game as a kid was just a flicker as a high schooler. The game was still very enjoyable, and I enjoyed my time with it, but the spark in my eye that I had playing this game all that time ago just didn't exist to the same degree as a teenager. I couldn't figure out exactly what it was that changed. But the truth of the matter is, I changed. I wasn't the same kid anymore with barely a concrete concept of the world around me. I grew up, and so did my view of the world. And so my view of this thing I once deemed perfection became something far more realistic. Mario Sunshine is not a perfect game by any means, but even with its flaws, I still acknowledge it as the game my younger self thought of it as when I played it for the first time. Of course, you could always chalk this case up to nostalgia changing your perception of a game over time, and that probably is the case. So I'll humor you with another example, on a more recent title, and the reason I'm making this video. I clearly remember the day I first played Breath of the Wild. It was late summer of 2018, and on that day, I was supposed to take my driver's test. I went to take the test, but because of a minor mistake, I ended up failing. I beat myself up about it for a good portion of that day, thinking about how simply that mistake could have been avoided. And so my dad ended up taking me to Best Buy later that day to cheer me up. We would frequently browse Best Buy as a family, often coming out of the store with a game or two, even empty-handed, which was fine. I saw a Nintendo kiosk set up with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild playable on a Switch. I had played friends' Switches before, typically party games like Mario Kart and the like, but for the better part of a year, I had wanted a Switch, and Zelda was the game that I wanted. I stayed at the kiosk for about 30 minutes, playing through the Great Plateau, taking in the sights and sounds I'd dreamed of since the Switch launched. My dad came over to me and asked, "This is the Switch you wanted, right?" He ended up buying me a Switch with a copy of Zelda. That first night playing Breath of the Wild was nothing short of magic. The game felt genuinely living, breathing. It felt as if the world was boundless and that I would never be able to uncover every secret or location hiding in the game's vast environment. As the days and weeks passed by, I would end up uncovering even more of the seemingly never-ending kingdom of Hyrule, scrambling to survive the challenge of Eventide Island under the covers of my bed in the dead of night, shield surfing in the Divine Beast sandstorm, getting lost in the deadly snow-capped mountains, all to reach the peak and look out onto the world in wonder. Looking to the land I'd traversed and where I had yet to go, with the looming threat of what lies in Hyrule Castle always hanging over my shoulder. It was amazing. This game consumed me, and not in an unhealthy, addictive way. This game's world consumed my mind. When I wasn't playing, all I could think about were the multitude of different discoveries that were waiting for me to find them. The last game that drew me into its world to this extent was Oblivion, one of my favorite RPGs of all time.
These are the closing days of the Third Era, and the final hours of my life.
For those of you who've never played Oblivion before, it's the fourth mainline installment in the Elder Scrolls series, precursor to Skyrim, everyone's favorite 10-year-old repackaged game. While the game came out in 2006, I didn't end up playing it until about 2010 or 2011. It was the one game in my dad's game collection that I was really curious about, but could never bring myself to play because of how ominous the box art was to me as an elementary school kid. I tried to play the game once or twice before, but the beginning sequence in the Imperial City sewers creeped me out, so I always stopped playing due to being a scared 9-year-old. But one day, when I was bored of all the games I was currently playing, I decided to steel myself and give Oblivion another try. I'd played games like Dead Space and Resident Evil. There was no way a game with cat people could be worse than those. So I began playing, and I finally made it out of the sewers. The feeling I got making it out of the sewers for the first time and being met with the sprawling painterly landscapes of Cyrodiil is quite literally a feeling I cannot put into words. The overhead sun lighting up the world surrounding my avatar was all I needed to want to explore the world. Once you leave the Imperial City sewers, you're ordered by the late Emperor Uriel Septim in his dying breath to deliver the royal heirloom, the Amulet of Kings, to a monk named Joffrey, who lives in a settlement known as Wayne Priory. This is the game's main story quest, and one the game treats with a great sense of urgency. I completely ignored the quest, and instead opted to explore the world I was just open to. In my entire life up to this point, I had never played a game that felt this free. Free to roam, free to discover. I recall a sequence of events that happened right as I began exploring the game on my own. I began wandering the world and traveling the roads, when I ended up coming across a small village. I walked into the inn and started talking to the people there. As a kid who had never played a role-playing game up to this point, this was surreal to me. These people felt real. I could talk to them. They had their own lives and personalities. After spending time with the villagers, I decided I wanted to try to kill somebody, just to see if it was possible. This was around the time that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood had come out, and I was fascinated with the idea of playing a stealthy killer who stuck to the shadows. And so, I tried it.
A good man who honors the Nine may visit the way shrines of Akatar.
Stop! You violated the law. Pay the
It was sloppy, to say the least, and I ended up having to hide from the guards. But I did it, and I knew I could get better at it with time. After the heat died down, I figured it was getting late. So I found an inn and slept to pass the time to the next day.
You sleep rather soundly for a murderer.
If you played Oblivion when you were younger, maybe you can relate to this. But the feeling I got hearing that low menacing voice and seeing the cloaked figure of Lucien Lachance looming over me as my character slept was spine-chilling. I commend Bethesda on the presentation of this character and scene, because I believed every minute of it. I don't want to go into depth on the Dark Brotherhood questline or Oblivion, as I'm a personal believer in the philosophy of the less you know the better, but it is by far one of the most enthralling gaming experiences I've ever had. When I wasn't playing Oblivion, I was writing notes about it. The game was the only game I ever stayed home sick from school to play. That is the extent that this game had me drawn in. What was probably hundreds of hours later, hundreds of side quests and excursions later, I finally ended up completing the main story. I know this game now, and it's kind of sad because there are times that I wish I didn't. With the main story completed, nearly 200 hours logged into the game, and with every shrine and side quest complete, I've, for the most part, completed Breath of the Wild. It was the first time in nearly 10 years that a game made me feel the same way that Oblivion made me feel when I first played it. And so, about a year after completing Breath of the Wild, I decided to give it another spin, in hopes to feel that magic that I felt when I first had the game in my hands. But it didn't happen. Hyrule felt smaller now. I knew these locations. I explored them tirelessly over 200 hours and weeks and months of playing. I knew the enemies, I knew how to fight them. Instead of feeling like the magical escapist adventure I thought of it the day I failed my driver's test, it felt like a romp through already treaded ground. From my tone, it may sound like I don't enjoy the game anymore, which is far from true. Don't be mistaken, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is still, in my opinion, one of the greatest games ever made. I still play it every now and then, and enjoy what it offers. However, I would be lying if I said that the new car smell hasn't faded. The first time you play through a game like Zelda or Oblivion, the entire world is open for you to discover. In fact, Breath of the Wild's entire identity is built around the concept of discovery, and it's easily the game's greatest achievement. Playing it that first time really does make you feel like you and Link are both discovering this world together. I personally have so many memories tied to early experiences in this game when everything was new to me. One particular memory that sticks out to me about Breath of the Wild happened the night I got my Switch and started playing the game. I was doing quests, trying to make the money to buy the Hyrule armor set. I'd finally gotten the money for the armor, and so I returned to Kakariko Village to buy it. When I got to the village, it started to rain, and so I bought the armor with the sound of the rain surrounding the shop I was in. I donned the armor and hood and rode off in the rain to explore the world set before me. To you all watching, that memory might seem rather simple or insignificant. But in reality, it's those little insignificant seeming memories that stand out in my mind. Those times where I truly get lost in the world and the game is trying to immerse me. Before hundreds of hours of playtime boils the gameplay experience down to a science. Personally, it's harder for me to get immersed in a big world when I already know all of its secrets. Here we are, at the end of the video, and the few final points I want to make. I apologize if my points were a bit scattered and all over the place. This is a topic I've been thinking about for quite a long while. If you've never played Breath of the Wild or Oblivion, I would highly advise you do. And if you are playing either of these games for the first time, I ask that you enjoy the ride. Cherish that initial playthrough, because that first dive into the world of Hyrule and Tamriel respectively were some of the most fulfilling gaming experiences I've ever had. Take your time, because you only get to discover a game once. That is why The first playthrough of a game is so special.